Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making some wooden USB covers. So in my never-ending quest to try to find projects where you can use up scrap wood, I thought, I wonder if I could make some wooden USB housings or covers. And I thought, why not? It is possible. I mean, it wouldn't take much stock, and if you paid for that stock, why would you want to just throw it out when there could be a potential project there that you could make something out of? So with that being said, I have a USB stick, and well, let's start with seeing if we can get the existing cover off of that memory stick. Well, here we have the USB memory stick, and it does have an existing plastic cover on it, along with this little lid. We need to get this black plastic thing off, and the only way I could think of to get it off would be some gentle persuasion. Enter gentle persuasion. Now, we're not going to hammer the hell out of this and destroy it. We just want to take it in the pliers like this, give it a gentle squeeze, and we're hoping to crack the seal and hopefully get that USB cover off of there. And this one is being difficult. I don't want to put too much pressure on it because I'm afraid of damaging the core of this thing. And once the core is damaged, of course, it pretty much makes the rest of it useless. So I can feel it giving way, but again, I'm afraid of damaging it. So that's no problem. We'll just work at it, and hopefully we'll get this thing to pop off. And there it is. We have the original cover off, and now we can gently take off this end cap here. And there is our USB stick. Now, all we need now is to choose some stock to build around it. Well, up on the rack I found this piece of walnut which has some really crazy looking grains in it, and I think it'll be perfect for a USB stick. It's pretty much useless for anything else. Now, for the record, this is 3/4 of an inch thick, which is what I would like to see for the final thickness on this particular USB stick, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, wood and plastic react and act in so many different ways, it's hard to say. But what we need to do first is measure very carefully the size of this metal plug at the end of the USB stick so we know what size of an opening we are going to need in our stock. Well, after some careful measuring, I can see that it's 3/16 of an inch by 1/2 an inch wide, and that is the opening that we're going to need to place this plug in our wooden cover. However, the actual chip or the fiber card that the chip is attached to is a little wider. It's 9/16. So we're going to have to make some adjustments inside of this thing once we glue it all together. I think what we're going to start off with is going to the table saw and ripping our stock that we need. But we want to make sure that whatever we rip off this block, we want to keep it in the same order that we cut it so that when we glue it back together, we can minimize the seams that you'll be able to see in it. So let's decide exactly how it is that we're going to cut it. Well, I think the very first step that we need to do with this is I think we need to make sure that this edge here is flat, and what we will do is we are going to trim a piece of this off big enough to work with, maybe about 3/4 of an inch, because we're going to need to cut a dado in that piece that is going to be, oh gee, figure it out, 3/16 of an inch deep and 1/2 an inch wide. That will leave 1/8 of an inch on either side of the stock. I know I'm not really explaining this very well, but let me rip this stock into the pieces I need and get back to you here to show you exactly what it is that I'm referring to. Well, what I've done with our block is I have cut off a 3/4 inch wide sliver, and I have also cut off a 1/8 inch sliver. And this is our excess piece. I want to keep these in the exact same order so that when they get glued back together, everything will look fine and we'll be able to hide and conceal that joint. But now what we need to do is on this side in here, that is where we're going to be cutting our dado. And we are going to be doing it on the table saw, and it's just a matter of setting the height of your blade and making multiple passes in order to make this thing fit.
The initial stock is 3/4 of an inch wide. Now we need a 1/2 inch wide dado in the middle of this thing. So what I've done is I've set the fence for 1/8 of an inch. That will start off our cutting and leave an 1/8 of an inch piece of board on either side of the dado. The height of the blade is set at 3/16 of an inch, and that's the thickness of our USB's metal plug. And that, by continuing to make passes and rotating our piece 180 degrees and shifting our fence slightly each time, eventually we're going to get the size of the dado we need, which will be 3/16 of an inch deep and 1/2 inch wide.
Well, one thing that I forgot to mention is that I also marked the ends. I have a couple of black marker marks on here that will coincide with the black marker marks on there so that I know exactly how it lines up and which way it goes. But we need to now make this dado a little bit wider to accept the chip or the circuit board here. We know that it's going to fit this piece, but we need it to fit the other piece. So we're just going to line this up for how far we want our USB plug to extend beyond our wood. And once we get that marked or in place, we're going to put a little mark there, just like that. And we'll take a square and transfer that mark across both of these thin little 1/8 inch lips. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get an X-Acto knife, just a small one, and very carefully we're going to cut here and trim it back so that we can get enough to get our circuit board inside of this thing. You know, in retrospect, I think this is the wrong tool for the job, and I think we need to get ourselves a small little 1/4 inch chisel. And with a little bit of patience and some careful chiseling, we've chiseled away enough to get our circuit board inside. And of course, then this piece here will mount on top of it, just like this. Now, you can't just have it like this now. This is way too huge. Who wants something like this for their computer? Well, that would just be silly. So at this point now, what we want to do is cut our dado piece here. We want to cut it at 1/8 of an inch past the dado. So we'll set up our fence on the table saw, and we're going to rip that piece to get us our final thickness of our USB stick. We now have this piece cut to our thickness, and here is our cap for it, just like that. Our USB end will stick out this side, and it will get CA glued in there. But now what we're going to need is, if we could just get this in here where it's supposed to be, we would like to get a plug or an end cap to go right in here just to finish this off so that we don't have this hole in the back end, of course. So take a measurement of the inside of this very carefully from the same stock, because you should have offcuts here. So cut an end cap plug to go in the end here for gluing into place. And with our end cap cut, we're just going to apply a little glue to 3 of the 4 sides. We don't want any on the top of it just yet. We're going to spread our glue across this here and just sit it into place. And you'll see here, let me get that glue bottle out of our way. I have it lined up so that this will prevent the chip from pushing back any further into our USB cover. So we'll just sit this in place firmly like that. We're going to clean up our squeeze out, let that set up, and then we can CA glue in our USB stick. Now we're just going to take a little tiny dab of CA glue here, just a drop right there on our USB stick. That may have even been too much. Take a little bit of that off. And we're just going to put our chip in place like this and set our USB stick in place with a little bit of CA to let that set up. Just make sure we're not leaking out the other side here. We are a little bit. There we go. We'll let that set up now, and that will be glued in place, and we can move on with putting our cap on our USB stick. Well, the next thing that we want to do is we want to glue our cap on here. So we're going to take a little bit of glue. Now you don't want to go crazy with this, just a little bit, because we don't want a lot of squeeze out coming into the inside, but you want good coverage. So we're going to spread this glue nice and even here all along our wooden USB case. And once we get it all spread across here and we're happy with it, what we're going to do is sit this in place, and you want to clamp it really well to try to get rid of any seams. Make sure everything is lined up and everything is flush, and get some clamps on there and hold it really well together. Well, our next step, once the glue is all set up, is we need to trim this to length. And what we're going to do for starters, though, is we're going to take a bit of painter's tape, and that painter's tape is going to get put around the end of our USB stick here just to keep the dust out of it while we're trimming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this for how long it needs to be, and I'm going to cross cut it over at the table saw, and then it's just a matter of giving this a really good sanding. And there you have it. A wooden USB cover. Well, the walnut, guys, wasn't as spectacular as what I thought it was going to be when I slapped on some Danish oil, but yet it's still pretty cool. And I still like the idea of that custom wooden cover that would definitely differentiate your USB from somebody else's. I mean, how many of them out there have a custom cover on it like this? Now, I know that this is a shorter program than I would normally put out, but sometimes a little short one is good. And it's something that can use up a bit of scrap in your wood or in your shop. Now, here's a thought. How about making multiples of these and giving them as Christmas gifts? I know it's right now it's just the beginning of spring, but why not think down the road? Christmas, birthdays, whatever. It's always good to use up a bit of scrap. Well, guys, that's it for this week's show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're going to try making some of these custom USB casings. And you never know. You might come up with a better plan than me. And let me know if you do. Guys, I want to thank you for tuning in again this week. And I'm going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.